What's up, everybody? My name is Brad, and today I'm in front of my Stephen King shelf, so I've got a Stephen King themed video for you. Today I'm going to be ranking the Dark Tower series in order from my favorite to my most favorite. I say it like that because I do like all of these books. There aren't any of the books in the Dark Tower series that I don't like, but obviously there's some that I like more than others. But I'm going to be ranking them from number 8 up to number 1, number 1 being my most favorite. Going into this, there will be spoilers for some of these books, so if you haven't read it and you're worried about spoilers, go ahead and step away. I would hate to have to spoil any of this series for you. It's a great series and it's too good to be spoiled, so if you haven't read it and you're worried about spoilers, go ahead and step away. I will say, since I shot my Stephen King collection video, I have picked up the last 2 Dark Tower books I was missing. I did get Wind Through the Keyhole and the Wastelands, so I've got a full collection now of the Dark Tower books, so I thought I'd go ahead and do this video ranking them in order. Number 1, like I said, being my most favorite one. So starting out at number 8 is Wind Through the Keyhole. This is the 8th book in the series, publishing order wise. But if you do it in chronological order, it would be book 4.5. So it would be between Wizard and Glass and Wolves of the Calla. This is a fun book. The reason it's at number 8 is because it really doesn't progress the story as far as Roland and the quartet getting to the Dark Tower. It's Roland. They sort of stop for a storm, and while the storm's blowing over, Roland tells them a story from his childhood. And it's cool because the setup is it's a story within a story. So he's telling the story about catching a skin changer, I believe is what it is, when he was younger. And then within that story, he tells another story, sort of a fairy tale with the Covenant Man and this magical tiger and stuff. It's a good book. If you are going to read it, though, my suggestion is wait until you've read books 1 through 7, and then you can read this one. Since it doesn't really progress the main story at all. So that's number 8, Wind Through the Keyhole. Next up, number 7, the one that started it all, is The Gunslinger. This is our first introduction to Roland and Midworld. This is actually the first book that Stephen King ever wrote. Carrie was the first book he ever published, but he wrote this book when he was 19 and still in college. And sometimes you can tell that while reading it, that he was sort of, in college classes and stuff. He sort of uses big words for just the sake of using big words and things like that. But like I said, this is our introduction to Roland. It's got some, in all these books, Wind Through the Keyhole doesn't have art, but all the other books do. And I love the art in all of them, except for Wizard and Glass. That one's sort of abstract art, which I don't like. But the art in all these other ones is great. I'll show off some pictures from some of them. Like I said, this is our introduction to Roland, and we also meet Jake in this book at the way station. Here's another. This is them going under the mountains with the slow mutants. Like at the end of this book, we finally meet the man in black who's been chasing. The book opens up. The man in black fled across the desert and the gunslinger followed. I believe that's right. Yeah. There's another really great line in here from Jake. Might not be exactly, but I'm paraphrasing. There are other worlds in these, which ties in heavily to the rest of the series. But I like the shootout in Toll in this book, and getting to know Roland a little bit, and then the ending of the book with the man in black, the palaver with the man in black is really good. So this is number 7, The Gunslinger. Number 6 is Song of Susanna. There's something that happens in this book that I think most people either love it or they hate it, and that is the inclusion of Stephen King adding himself into the story of the Dark Tower. Roland and Eddie in this book, they actually go and meet Stephen King as a character in the book. He's an author in the book. He's written like Salem's Lot in those books, and he had written part of the Dark Tower, but he had stopped. So they try to convince him to write, the rest of the books to finish it out. I really love that. That Stephen King including included himself in it. I know some people say that they didn't like it, that it was sort of egotistical of him to do that and stuff, but for me, I loved it. And it's sort of him being in the Dark Tower series as, you know, his own self, and as an author, that makes all the other books that he's ever written connected to the Dark Tower, just because he's written them and he himself is a character in the Dark Tower. So that's kind of mind-blowing to think of it like that. Reminds me of that meme from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, where the guy's in the basement. He's got all the charts with the lines, the sort of conspiracy theory thing. But this is a good book. Our quartet sort of split up between New York and I can't remember if it's Midworld or Inworld then. But this is sort of the calm before the storm, leading into the last book. But that's number 6 on my list, Song of Susanna. Number 5 is Wolves of the Calla, and that's got Susanna on the front throwing the Ariza discs. This book introduces Father Callahan from Salem's Lot into the Dark Tower world. It sort of goes through his backstory, how he escaped from Salem's Lot, and how he's discovered there's different types of vampires and things. And he's living in Calaveras Sturgis, where the quartet ends up. And eventually the quartet agrees to help them fight the wolves from the Thunderclap towards the end of the book. And that's a really cool fight scene. The wolves themselves are really cool. They're basically Doctor Doom robots, and they throw the little golden sneeches from Harry Potter that just cuts people to pieces, and they carry lightsabers. So it was cool to have these different iconic things from different properties thrown all together here in the Dark Tower world. And Salem's Lot, the book itself, is a physical thing in here, which I thought was cool, sort of tying in some of his other King's Extended Universe and things into the books. So this is number 5 on my list, Wolves of the Calla. Number 4 on the list is The Wastelands. And this is one of the new ones I got. I had never actually seen this edition before. I'd seen the older, I guess they're older Plume editions. One has a train on the front, and one looks like it has a house on it. I guess that's the house on Dutch Hill on it. But I'd never seen this one before, and it matches the other Plume editions I got. And that's Blaine the Pain there on the cover. Like I said, this is number 4. Some of the scenes I like from this one are Jake, when he goes to the house on Dutch Hill. That's just a cool scene. Let me see if I can find that art real quick, because that is one of my favorite scenes in the whole book. There's that, and then they go to the city of Blood, which is really cool. Oh, there's a cool shot of the Dark Tower. And they fight, Jake fights the TikTok man, and then the ending of the book is great, where they get on Blaine the Mono himself, and they travel across the Wastelands. And in my opinion, there's Blaine the Mono there. I think that's the same Wastelands from the Talisman book, where Jack Sawyer is going across the Wastelands, also in a train. Try one more time to find this picture. Should have had it bookmarked. There it is. This is Jake escaping from the house in Dutch Hill. He's being drawn into the world by Eddie. So that's a cool scene. That's probably my favorite, one of my favorite scenes in the book, the house in Dutch Hill, the haunted house. But they do the riddles with Blaine at the end, and it sort of leaves off on a cliffhanger, which was really good. I like that one. So that's number 1, 2, 3. This is number 4 on my list, Wastelands. Number 3 is Wizard and Glass. This is mostly a sort of flashback book. They get off the train from the Wastelands and they end up in Topeka, Kansas. I believe it's Topeka, where the setting for the stand takes place with Captain Trips. You know, the disease has gone through. They see sort of graffiti of the Crimson King and things, and the Emerald City from Wizard of Oz is in this book. But they sort of stop and Roland tells them a story from his past. And I really like the story. It gives a lot of backstory to Roland, letting you know sort of why he is the way he is, why he's sort of cold-hearted and shut off emotionally, and doesn't really let any attachments form between him and the rest of the members of the quartet. But it's him and his buddy Cuthbert and Elaine, and they go to the barony of Megis, and there's a love interest for Roland, Susanna. Stephen King doesn't usually do love stories too good, but I felt like in this one, since they're younger, and Stephen King writes good young characters, I felt like the love story in this one was pretty good. This is the most Western feeling one, other than the Gunslinger, sort of Wild West, shootouts and cowboys and things, which I liked a lot. And this has one of the coolest villains in almost all the series, Rhea of the Coos, I believe is how you say her name. She's sort of this witch lady, and I loved all her stuff. She was great. And I believe this is the book that introduces the Wizard's Rainbow, and Rhea of the Coos had the pink grapefruit. And then at the end, they head to the actual Emerald City, and there's sort of a shootout with the Man in Black, which was cool. So this is number 3 on my list, Wizard and Glass. Number 2, and these top 4, Wastelands, Wizard and Glass, and the next 2, those are so hard to pick, which one's better than the other one. This just happened to be how I was feeling today. But really the top 4 could be in any order. They're all great entries in the series. But number 2 is The Drawing of the Three. This is the second book in the series, and this one really opens up the world and lets you know sort of just how weird and strange this journey is going to be. It ends up, or it starts out after the palaver with the Man in Black from the Gunslinger. There's these weird creatures called lobstrosities. They chop off Roland's trigger fingers, and he's walking along the beach, and there's these freestanding doors along the beach that he opens, and he sort of travels inside the mind of the people on the other side of the door. There's Eddie Dean and Odetta/Detta. I believe her last name is Holmes at that point. And then Jack Mort is the last door. But this book, like I said, I like this one. It really sets up how weird the story is going to be, and where we're going to be going on this Dark Tower journey. I love Eddie. Eddie is probably one of my favorite characters in the series. And then Odetta/Detta turns into Susanna Dean. She's a great character. And I love the shootouts and sort of all the stuff that they do in New York. Jack Mort was a really creepy, cool villain that was involved in Jake and Susanna's storyline. So I really like this one, how it expanded upon the expanded upon the Gunslinger, the first book. That's number 2, Drawing of the Three. And the last book, my number 1, is the last book in the series, The Dark Tower. On the cover there we have Roland with the field of roses and the Dark Tower in the background. I think this is my favorite one because it's the culmination of all the books. We're finally reaching the end. Even Stephen King at the beginning, his little dedication speaks to that. This is the end of the story. Yeah. He who speaks without an attentive ear is mute. Therefore, constant reader, this final book in the Dark Tower cycle is dedicated to you. Long days and pleasant nights. And you can tell that this is, the culmination of it's like 30 years of storytelling of King, writing these books, 30 years or so. This is the culmination of, all these books leading up to this one point. Roland finally reaching the tower and what happens to the quartet. This book's super emotional. There's some really tragic deaths in here of characters that you've grown, emotionally attached to over, 6, 7 books. And there's one that's just out of nowhere, the character death, and it just hits you hard. Stephen King himself is in this book again, and it has his actual accident in real life where he got run over by the van. That is part of the story in here, which I thought was really cool. We finally meet the Crimson King. If I can find his picture, there's There's a cool art of him in here. And then Roland finally does get to, well, here's the Crimson King. I'll show off his art real quick because that's great. But Roland finally does get to the tower and climbs to the top. And like I said, spoilers already, but super spoilers for the ending of the book. Roland gets to the top of the tower and he opens the door and he walks out onto the alkali desert from the Gunslinger. Ka is a wheel. He started the journey over. He sort of slowly starts to forget the journey that we've gone through, and he's back in that desert again. He's back to thinking he hasn't reached the tower yet. He's many miles away from the tower. He's trudging along, and the ending to the book gives me chills every time I read it. It's the same way it opens. The man in black fled across the desert, and the Gunslinger followed. But this time, it might end differently because Roland does have the Horn of Eld. So maybe this is the time that he actually does reach the tower and does not repeat the process over and over. And we don't know how many times Roland has reached the tower, gone to the top, and started the journey over and over and over again. I think that's another reason why this is my #1 book in the series, is because I think that's a perfect ending to the series. I don't think he could have ended it any other way, in my opinion. I mean, he could have, but this was perfect, in my opinion, the way to end it. So that's my #1 Dark Tower book, The Dark Tower itself. But if you've read the Dark Tower books, I'd love to hear your rankings down in the comments below. What's your favorite? What's your least favorite? Some of your favorite scenes and stuff. But if you do have any spoilers, be sure you put the spoiler tag above your comment so people don't see any spoilers if they're scrolling through. But that's all I have for you today. Again, my name is Brad, and thanks for spending your time with me today, and I'll talk to you later. Bye.